Hey everyone, welcome back to Dan 91's garage. This week we'll be modifying the Tuning Developments exhaust so it actually fits the car, and then we'll be fitting a catalytic converter so it's actually road legal. Without further ado, let's just jump straight into this. See you in a sec. We're going to have a catalytic converter in it, otherwise the car is not allowed on the road. So this is the centre section off of the vehicle. I've made up a wooden jig to hold it on, and that way when we cut out our section for the cat, we can then put this back in, bolt it down, and it should be in the right place where it all lines up, so we can tack this together before we go and try on the car. So what we've got to do, if you remember, the exhaust itself is an inch or 25mm shorter than it should be, and I had to have wooden spacers on this joint at the end to actually make it fit the vehicle in any vague fashion. So what we've got to do is make this section longer, because this is the sort of straightest section of exhaust where you could really add anything in, and being as we've got to cut it anyway for the cat, we might as well do it here. So the catalytic converter is from Magnaflow, and its part number is 59959. It's 3-inch in and out, and it's a 4-inch main body in the middle. Overall it's 8 inches long with an inch of straight to tuck your tubes in. So obviously the other tube fits in here. Some of them come just to a sort of cone shape, and then you have to actually weld it, sort of butt weld the pipe on there. But these are a bit easier because you basically slip the other pipes in, and that way you can sort of like move it around a little bit before you tack it on. So the catalytic converter is 8 inches long, which is 200mm. Each end is an inch of straight, so that's 25mm. Which leaves us 150mm or 6 inches gap we need essentially in the middle of this pipe. So essentially we need a 6-inch gap here for this to fit into. However, as I mentioned, this entire system is an inch short, or 25mm too short. So what we've got to do is, when we're putting this on, we need to leave a little gap here for a tack, then 25mm of straight, and that'll bring us up to the beginning of our gap, or the center of the catalytic converter. Then we need to cut out 5 inches instead of the 6, because what we're going to do is slide this cut section that way by an inch, or 25mm, which will then give us the extra inch we didn't cut out. So our 5-inch gap that we cut here slides further over to become our 6-inch gap, which is what we need to then have our 8-inch catalytic converter fitted. That's the plan. I've had a quick look at this. There's no markings for in or out, and there's no arrow to show flow direction. Some catalytic converters will have an arrow on them showing which way they flow. This doesn't have anything of the sort. So I did have a quick look online, and when people were talking about Magnaflow cats, they said if there's no arrow, it's not directional. So there we go, we're going to go with that. Obviously I'd try and line the seam up with something nice, or maybe have the writing facing down so you can read what it is. Not that it really matters, but yeah, there we go. So that's what we're going to do. So we need to start marking this up, then we can take it out and chop it. The idea is, once this is cut out, obviously this front and rear section are going to be independent to each other, so you're going to have fun lining them up. Imagine trying to do that on the car when this has got like a diagonal at the back. That's going to drop down. This front has got 2 or 3 rubbers. This has a rubber on it, so this is then going to pull over that way. And then there's me underneath fighting with this, trying to pull it and poke it and twist it and then tack it underneath the car on axle stands. It's not going to be fun. So I decided this was going to be more accurate than the other way of doing it, and we're going to find out whether or not I was right by the end of it. So if you just have a look up there, you can see it's a 200 cell cat. So it's a sport cat. The 100 cell ones, they obviously don't do anything. This is as far forward as I can get the cat, and this is the original position. And because it's a 3-inch system from the downpipe back, it's so close to everything under the car as it runs now. This, if I placed it in the sort of front section, this would actually be banging against the gearbox. In fact, this sort of occupies the same sort of area as the gearbox mount. So the only way to get this any further forward really would be to redesign the whole system, and I haven't got the time or money for that. So here we go. I went with a big name brand. And I guess we'll find out what happens. So time to take this off and give it a chop, I think. So as we discussed, 3mm gap so you can get a spot of weld in. 1 inch of tube or 25mm to fit inside. Then what I did was I got this piece of plastic, which is basically damp proof course, and cut that to 5 inches across because that's the gap we want. Wrapped it around the tube, and then that gave me 2 edges that I could quite easily draw around with a permanent marker. So that's our 5-inch gap that we need to cut out, because the other way of doing it would have been tape and measuring from somewhere. So once you set this as your front edge, wrap this around and pull it tight around the tube, essentially it gives you the other edge sort of without having to tape it off. So when you remove that, I've drawn around those 2 places. So this is the piece I've got to cut out, and I've got to go to the line and leave the actual line in place. So that'll be that. The other thing I've done as well is, obviously on this you can see I've drawn some lines, essentially the outline of the angled pieces to this flange, because obviously once we cut this into 2 pieces, the front will then be independent to the back, and it's very important that we get this flange the same orientation as it was to the back one when we put it back on the car, otherwise the sections that join this will be all over the place. So I've drawn the angles on that, so all I've got to do is set it in there, twist it around to get the angles right, and also I've marked up here how far it goes, and can't go much further. I'm pretty much up to the weld anyway. And obviously the rear section of this has the bar on here for the exhaust rubbers, and what I've done is I've used a 12mm bolt underneath it, turned it round and rested that on it, so when I slide this back I'll be able to get it on the other side. So all I need to do is turn that down till it touches on this, and then that sets the orientation of the rear one. So there we go. It's not particularly pretty, but the good thing is this only has to be vaguely the right length because it's slipping inside the cat itself. You don't have to worry about things butting up and then the end of it being the wrong angle and it deviating off down a different path. We just need to basically get it short enough to fit inside, so that's cool. We also have this section we chopped out, so we can now use that for a bit of practice welding. I'm gonna use the MIG again, and got some stainless wire, so I've never used stainless before, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, this is the right thickness obviously, so we can get the settings right before we do it on the important job. So a bit more sanding and then she'll be ready to go. So there we go, all back in the jig, all lined up. 6-inch gap in between here for the cat. This section, if you put a straight edge across the top like that, this section here is about 0.8 of a mil lower, which is nothing I'm going to worry about really. And if you put this on the sides, lines up fine. This side also lines up fine, and it's all parallel with each other as well, so that's cool. Nothing's gone that way. Like I say, less than 0.8 of a millimetre difference after cutting a section out of it and then putting it back into a wooden frame made out of scrap. I think that's pretty good going. So what I might try and do is pack this up with some tape on the inside of the jaws. I don't want to take this off of the baseboard, because if I take that off it can then turn and twist and do all sorts of things. So 0.8 of a mil difference I think is more accurate than I could ever do it if I was just scrabbling around under a car. So yeah, we'll get some tape in there, see what that does. If not, we'll be on to tacking it, I think. Actually pretty happy with how this whole thing's gone. So there it is. The cat's fully welded in now. I did tack it initially, then try it on the car. It's about 2 or 3 mil short compared to fitting exactly onto the downpipe, but it's better it's slightly too short, because I can always put a tiny little spacer in rather than it being too long and constantly trying to push back and put all of that weight into the downpipe and the rest of the turbo kit at the front. So that's all sorted now. Did get some penetration through here, which is a lot more than the original system when that was welded, but I didn't back purge it. Obviously I don't have the facilities here to do any of that anyway, but being as it's after the turbo and only in the rest of the exhaust system, I'm not too worried about any of this. I can always sort of sand it out basically if I wanted to anyway. So there we go, that's that bit sorted. So now we can move on, start looking at the front end of it. Okay, sit rep. The exhaust back on the car with the lovely little catalytic converter in it. So he's now sitting in there, seems to clear everything. But like I said, we're 2 or 3 mil short, so better too short than too long. And obviously you can see here, when we pull this up, it's obviously going to start pulling all the exhaust and moving things, and not too keen on that, so I'm basically just going to make myself a little plate to go in here, put 2 gaskets, one either side. In the future I might look at making some sort of copper shims that I can stick 2 or 3 copper sort of spacers in there and clamp them all up together because they'll seal together, but for now I'll just go with 2 gaskets and a metal sheet. I've got a piece of 3mm up there that I've drawn up, so we'll just go have a quick look at that. There we have it, quite simple. Draw around one of the gaskets. So using geometry, the same method that we used last time on the downpipe heatsink. We found the centre of the circle, so we can now centre punch that. And I'll probably hole saw that out with a 51mm because I haven't got anything bigger. And then we'll use the die grinder on it to take it out to the right size. The other option was to chain drill it, but that'll take longer than hole saw and die grinding, I think. So we'll put the 3 holes in first because we've got to get them right, and then we can make sure that this fits to it. So we'll get on with that. See you when it's done. Okay then, so we've made up our little spacer and I've put them in there. We've now got 2 gaskets and 1 spacer, and now as close as I can get it, the exhaust basically just sort of slips up there. The end of this flange is a slightly different angle to this, but there's no way I was going to make the downpipe have a flange sort of an angle like that. So as it's got a flex joint here, you just sort of like twist that to the right position. So when that pulls up now, it puts the absolute minimum of sort of forwards or backwards pull or push on the centre exhaust. So that's cool. We haven't really lost anything here. It hasn't really dropped down too much. I've got to put it on the floor and measure my clearance again, because this was, as you can see from the sort of previous owner's scrub marks and the little sort of biff it's got on here. She's a bit low, but it's certainly not lower. It's about the same sort of depth as the bracket I've made, and also the sort of diagonal bend at the back there where that turns on the diagonal, that corner itself. They're all about the same height off of the floor, so that's pretty cool. Everywhere seems to fit. It seems to be about as central as it was, but with adding this spacer in, it's actually helped a bit more sort of with everything. There's a bit more clearance here from the sort of front hanging bracket to the anti-roll bar. The rear section here, if we try and slide our way across, so the back there where it goes through the exhaust tunnel, you can see it's pretty even. It's about 25 or 30mm each side. So around the back here, we've got the up and over pipe going over the diagonal brace for the panhard rod, and there's a good sort of 5 or 6mm there. Now ideally it would be about 10 or 15, so what I've done is I've ordered some more rubbers that are a bit stiffer, so I can replace the rubbers up here, because these have started to stretch now. What with the system now being sort of rested on the car for a few days, it sort of settles into its natural position. The thing is, nothing touches when you move it. It doesn't bang against anything, which is cool. So I don't think it's really going to do much unless we go over like a big bump, in which case it may well come down and knock on it. But it's not knocking at the moment at like 5 or 6mm. So hopefully the new rubbers will be shorter, and that'll jack the back of this exhaust up a little bit, which will give us enough clearance to not have to worry about doing anything to that pipe. I don't really want to have to cut it and weld like a sort of scallop section in or anything. It may come to the point where if it doesn't fit, I am just going to heat it up and then just sort of dent it in slightly. It's a massive pipe. It doesn't need a huge amount to clear. So the rubbers haven't arrived for this yet, so we're going to have to put a pause on the exhaust work. But what we can do is the intercooler's here and most of the pipe work. So we're going to start mounting the intercooler on the front and we'll go from there. But that'll all be coming up on the next episode of Dan91's Garage. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode.